Hey everyone, and welcome to DMI Live. It's Sunday again, and we are doing Counter Dawa again. Up tonight is Mr. Yasir Qadhi. He is Islam's best unintentional whistleblower, as far as I'm concerned. And we're going to be looking through the first of what will hopefully be quite a few videos, some live, some not, where it's under his Lighthouse series, and he's going through various problems that are facing the Islamic community. With me tonight, as usual, is my good compadre, Mr. Stop Spamming. Welcome, sir.
How's it?
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, so we will be diving into this in a second. Just to give you a little bit more context. So he's talking about seven crises within Islam. Now, he says this is for Western Muslims, but to be honest, most of these crises apply to Muslims in general, I would say, apart from maybe one of the seven. And as he acknowledges himself, it's not just seven, there's lots of them, but he's picking out the main problems. So there's some quite startling admittances and revelations, which you always get with Yasir Qadhi because he can't help just doing damage to Islam by being kind of a bit more honest than most Dawa guys. So this should be a fun one, and yeah, I hope everyone enjoys. So stops, unless you want to add anything before we start, I'll kick this
No,
off.
let's hit it.
Okie dokie.
One of the issues that we have to face with being born and raised in the West is we are exposed to almost 14 centuries of theological and legal controversies the minute we walk into our mosques. What I want you to realize is that you all, by merely walking around this room and talking to people, by merely logging onto YouTube and listening to 5, 10, 20 Islamic preachers and lectures, by merely going mosque to mosque and speaking to the people at those mosques, you all are introduced to a more diverse group of Muslims in a week or in an hour on YouTube than your great-grandfathers would have been exposed to in an entire lifetime. Let that sink in.
Right, I just
True.
want to stop it there because he's painting this as a crisis, the fact that you are going to be exposed to a more diverse range of Muslims. Now, I don't know why he would think that's a crisis unless he's thinking, well, that might lead to a more diverse set of opinions about Islam, and therefore that would represent a threat because you have maybe things that are going to inspire you to think a bit more. I don't know. I mean, how would you sort of analyze that stops in terms of why that would be seen a crisis?
I think it's quite simple because Islam is supposed to be this homogeneous mass, this ummah, where
Mm.
you have people who have one joint God with one joint message, and everybody understands that message, and everybody knows exactly what this is about. That you need to go to paradise and life is a test. Okay, so those are the basics. And for them, this is a common understanding of every Muslim. The problem comes in as soon as you start reading the Quran, as soon as you start going into secondary literature, as soon as you start going a little bit deeper and start digging, that's when the whole thing falls apart. And this is when you find different opinions on different things because the Quran is so badly written that it's absolutely
Yeah,
nothing consistent in the book.
I mean,
Anybody can draw anything they want, and this is what poses the problem. This is the faith crisis that he's talking about.
I certainly agree with that, but the way he's talking about it is this is specifically he's talking essentially, I suppose, from the perspective of say of Muslims living in the West, particularly America, and
Right.
because they're
Yeah.
in America, it's not just the say in Saudi Arabia, most of the people you're going to meet are people from Saudi, but in America, you're going to find people from the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, Bangladesh. You're going to find Somalis. You're going to find people from North Africa. You're going to get a higher range. And to me, I wouldn't have thought that's intrinsically a problem if they all kind of have the same basic beliefs. But he almost seems to be suggesting that because they're all from these different backgrounds, it's going to represent, yeah, even really small differences going to represent some kind of like mind breaking for the average Muslim or something, even if it's just like a really trivial kind of cultural difference or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see why he's making such a big deal of this, but yeah, I don't know. Well,
You're
I
right, it
do.
is cultural, but you need to appreciate even the Quran in West Africa is a different version to the one in Arabia. So
True. Yeah.
there are so many differences and so many cultural differences. Look, just look at the hijab. Look at the way that women are supposed to cover themselves.
Mm.
Can you tell me what the basic concept is? No. The only like
It's a good
in
point. Good point.
Tehran, what they're doing now, the latest fashion is to go half hair uncovered and half neck uncovered, because
Mm.
they're still following the covering up, because there they have the chador, which or the manton, which is different from the abaya, and which again is different from the niqab, is different from that, so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
every cultural region has their own version of how the women are covering themselves. So it's
Mm.
cultural. It's exactly what you are saying. The basics are there. One God, one message. But as soon as you go further than that, it's different.
But that's kind of funny then, because that almost suggests that like the thinking of say Orthodox Muslims, as he would like most Muslims to believe, is so dependent on this rigidity that even fairly you could argue trivial kind of differences are going to represent a threat, because it's like, oh well, if there's a slight variation on this, what else might there be a variation on? So maybe it's that kind of, he's worried about like a domino effect or something. But who knows anyway.
Well, remember this video I did with the Arab, masked Arab,
Oh
when we
yeah, yeah,
went
yeah, I do.
and
Yeah,
did
yeah.
this interview,
But
which
not a
then
real
led to
Muslim
the
one.
song about all the different versions of Islam, but they all say no, it's one Ummah.
All right, well,
I didn't get
we'll
that.
put we'll
Was
put a
that
pin in that
a
anyway. We'll
comment?
spin on and we'll see what else he's got.
Your great grandfathers, in all likelihood, had no idea of the diversity of the faith internally. They had
Yeah.
no idea of the sheer spectrum of ideas, controversies, theologies, madhabs, firqas, trends. They were born, they were raised, they died in one locality, and at max there were 2 or 3 little different firqas out there. Each one of them is culturally, in its own little bubble, and that's about it. And yet the average Muslim amongst you is exposed to not just the current, but the classical and the ones all over the world. As I said, you are exposed to a greater diversity in a few hours online than most of our great grandfathers would have been exposed to in an entire lifetime. So you have to get up to date as soon as possible. You have to understand an entire myriad of information, and that's not even beginning modernity. We're talking about yesterday's, controversies. So up.
Again, what
Mm-mm.
controversy? See, when he uses that word controversies, that, I mean, the main one that seems to bring the controversies internally to me is Yasir Qadhi himself. When he's talking about holes in the narrative, and he's admitting that the story of hadiths are basically completely rejected in academia, and he has to talk differently to non-Muslims than he does to Muslims because he basically knows it's kind of bullshit. Um, but I don't know what other controversies he's talking about, unless it's kind of, is it just be people being really frank about saying supporting child marriage or other stuff like that, where maybe some Muslims growing up are kind of protected from that in the early years. I'm still not entirely sure, but
Well, you need to appreciate that even today, Muslims have to accept the theory of evolution. They can't deny it. Of
oh,
course
but
they
they do
try.
though. They do.
There's a lot. I mean, I know, especially in Turkey, I mean, Erdogan is sending people out all the time. 10 people, no, don't believe this shit, this is wrong, and blah, blah, blah. And we as Muslims need to reject it. But in reality, they can't. And you see, this is the problem. And this is, I think, what Yasir Qadhi is talking about, that you have one set of information that comes from the Quran and another set of information that comes from reality. So how can you combine the two? You can't.
Uh,
And this is the problem. I think it's reality and faith. These are the
mm.
two opposing poles here, and this is where he sees a controversy.
And I suppose to go back to the diversity thing as well, as much as they are fringe minorities, there are Quranists out there whose reinterpretation of the religion is not trivial. It's pretty major, and you've also got the
Exactly. Yeah.
the Ahmadis as well, which is a pretty significant break. So I suppose exposure to that, particularly online, would represent a threat to the Orthodox position. So yeah, there's that element. But anyways, let's spin on.
dating the old. This is the first issue. Navigating classical, navigating sectarianism, navigating the various trends of the ummah that we're all familiar with in this part of the world. And also realize here in the West as well, we are exposed much more than in the East, even though modernity has introduced this to the East as well. Yet still, by and large, in Muslim majority countries, by and large, the trends are a little bit less. Whereas,
see, I would question that, and I imagine you probably would
Exactly.
too, Stops. In fact, from what you've spoken anecdotally, obviously you've had plenty of personal experience in the Middle East, and we can all look at, say, polls about apostasy and stuff. I would say, if anything, it's probably worse in Muslim countries in terms of, from their perspective, the number of people questioning or leaving Islam, or at least kind of rejecting the hardline positions because they just want to live a kind of more modern life. I would say in many cases it's worse in the Middle East.
Correct. I agree with you because they don't have the experience. In a Muslim who's been living in Europe or in America or wherever, they already have experience how to sort of handle this, how to square the triangle or whatever you want to call this. And a person who lives in Saudi and who suddenly, like I arrive there, I rock up and I tell them, well, they come to me and they say, well, what does it say? Does it actually say 6 days in the Quran? Or no, they actually come, does it say 7 days in the Quran? And I said, no, it says 6 days or 8 days. And then they say, oh, but how does that work? I see, you see, this is the problem in Islam, in the Quran. And for them, they are flabbergasted because this is the first time they hear this. Whereas in the West, people have heard this many times and have already sort of managed to either build a Teflon layer or some sort of a rejection mechanism, which the people in the Middle East don't have because they're confronted with this like for the first time.
And also the Dawa apologetics that we get are, again, as much as they pretend that this is about converting other people, its primary role is to keep Western Muslims from leaving. So they definitely
Exactly.
have tailored it to the psychology of Western
Yeah.
Muslims. And obviously that's a generalization. Obviously, I'm not saying that every Muslim is the same psychology, or not even in every country, but we know that they're exposed to Western education systems and stuff like that, which is why they'll focus on things like these stupid scientific miracle claims, and or Sabor Ahmed will do his pathetic kind of debunks of evolution, where it sounds like he knows what he's talking about, but he doesn't. And so, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And
Anyway,
it's,
right,
it's
let's.
especially girls. It's especially girls who cannot handle if I, as a man, I will go and say to them, you have the same rights as me, and I will open the door for you. And yes, I will treat you as an equal in the office, but I will treat you as a lady in private. And they say, yeah, but it should be the opposite. I said, no, it's not. So I had girls who would wear the abaya and they would cover completely head to toe. So as soon as I would enter the room, they would like quickly throw over the scarf and whatever they had. And then when I left the room, they would open it again because it was only girls in the room. And then
Yeah.
after like 3 months later or 6 months later, they wouldn't even bother anymore. So you could see the gradual sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
level of comfort that they developed with this.
in Muslim minority countries, because we all mix in the same mosque, right? Because all of us ethnically and socially and culturally and politically all come together, we are exposed to a vast array, a vast spectrum of Muslims from around the globe following different interpretations, different shuyukh, different scholarships, different trends, much more than the average cousin of ours back home. And that's one of the ironies of living in the West. So this is the first issue that we have to deal with.
Okay, so yeah, he's kind of confirmed, and this is pretty much what Valentino was saying in the comments. What he means by point one is there are lots of different jurisprudence and creeds, etc., which the average Muslim isn't aware of. Yeah, I mean, I suppose from my point of view as an outsider, when I look at Islam, to me, a lot of this stuff seems fairly trivial in terms of the differences. But obviously, I understand from a Muslim who has just been told, look, it's only just this one way, and then suddenly even these relatively small differences is going to break that kind of that illusion. So yeah, I could see why it's it would still represent a threat. So yeah, probably should have waited to this point before we started talking about it, actually, because yeah, I suppose Yasir does explain it a bit more there. But
The second issue, still internally, is that not just theological, not just spiritual, not just legal, but we are now grappling with cultural Islam, the cultural Islam of our parents and the cultural Islam of the land that we have been born and raised in. So not only do we have to deal with the issue of the spectrum of theology, the spectrum of law, the spectrum of spirituality, we also have the reality that there is a cultural clash that is infused with religion as well. Culture is not devoid of religion, and religion is not devoid of culture. The two are intertwined. Nowhere in the world does Islam exist except within a culture.
I mean,
Wow.
it's kind of funny for him to say that, because it sort of
Exactly.
runs against the narrative that this is this perfect word of God, and it doesn't matter what language it's in, it doesn't matter what, it's basically the same message, and everything flows from Islam. Whereas really, he's acknowledging the truth that actually no, because it flows from Islam, kind of, at least to some degree, flows from the culture it's in. So therefore, it is a message that is subject to, you know, the bending power of just ordinary humans and how they interpret it, and
Exactly.
therefore it's weaker than they think. So I didn't know if you want to cut in there, Stops, or
No. I said the same thing. This is why I said, wow. When he said this, I thought, oh, hang on, this is dangerous turf that you're on at the moment.
again, this is the thing, he always says the quiet parts out loud. He's our greatest inside man on Islam.
Wow.
That's just the reality. Nowhere in the world is Islam in a vacuum. So in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in
It was.
Nigeria, in Pakistan, in Arabia, there are manifestations of Islam that have taken centuries to evolve and are conducive to their culture. Our parents migrated here by and large, and almost all of us are children of immigrants, and we're born and raised attached to a cultural milieu, and yet at the same time, that culture is not our culture. It is the culture of our grandparents. It is the culture even of our parents. Yet we are very, very much traversing multiple cultures. Almost everybody sitting here is bilingual, trilingual. Almost everybody sitting here is fully comfortable in multiple cultures. And automatically this raises the very awkward question, what is the cultural Islam? Don't have to necessarily follow.
See, and it's not
Okay.
just the culture as well. I mean, again, he's really conceding a lot of ground here. But I would say the other thing that he doesn't talk about is the fact that in a Western country, you're going to have free access to the opinions just of other religions, let alone the critique from you know, the point of view of non-believers. But you're not going to be able to be in a position where Islam is just so dominant in the culture that you don't get to hear about Hinduism and Judaism, Christianity and Sikhism and Buddhism. Whereas in a Western context, especially if you're going to university, you're going to meet all these people from these different backgrounds. And then it will be like, oh, okay, so we've got a whole fresh new idea here as well. And that is also going to represent a kind of threat. So again, it's interesting that he's acknowledging the dilemma for Muslims in general here.
Yeah, but he's acknowledging the problem, and I'm very curious what solution he's going to offer.
Well, yeah, I suppose, I mean, because this is just kind of an introductory video, I suppose we'll get into this more as we cover some other videos of his. I think he sort of takes these
Okay.
things one by one, but I think he's just laying out the problems at the moment in this video. So not really any solution so far that I can remember. It's been a while since I watched this video, but
So yeah,
yeah.
but Jesse, this means we can just stop doing whatever we're doing. We just say, watch the Yasir Qadhi videos. There you have all the problems of Islam, all neatly, everything in a row.
Yeah, indeed.
What is the manifestation of the cultural Islam? This isn't theology, this isn't spirituality, this isn't law, this is now cultural Islam. And we all understand that there's nothing wrong with cultural manifestations of Islam, but you know, the culture that I find myself in, or my children's culture, is not the culture of my parents. So we have another set of issues to deal with, and that is rediscovering, or I should say uncovering, not rediscovering, uncovering what it means to be a second generation hyphenated Muslim in America, hyphenated Arab American,
You
Desi
can't.
American, Somali American.
Jesse,
We're all
just
hyphenated.
just
Go ahead.
pause for a second, because there's one big mistake that he's making here. He is totally ignoring the level of ignorance. Because look, the Quran is meant and intended for uneducated, simple simple people without any kind of education. And now suddenly his children are going to a school in America where they get a level of education. I mean, they're trying to stop this. Okay, I understand this, but they're still in school getting a little level of education that was unheard of 1,000 years ago. So you cannot in any way reconcile now what the Quran says with the reality that the kids are being brought up with today. I mean,
Mm.
simple things like what Zakir Naik was still doing like 40, 50 years ago are totally ridiculous. This is being mocked even by Muslims. You cannot do this anymore. And this is the problem, that he totally ignores the level of education, in the discrepancy in level of education between classic Islam and modern cultural Islam in the West.
Yeah, fair point.
American, because the irony, as you're all aware, is that an Arab American and a Desi American share more in common, in spite of the fact that their parents are from opposite cultures, than they do with their first cousins back home, right? An Egyptian American and a Pakistani American born and raised here have a greater rapport. They have a shared heritage. They have a shared inside jokes. They have a shared cultural understanding that is more at home amongst each other than they do with their biological cousins back home. And that is because we have a unique hyphenated Islamic culture that is being created as we quite literally live in this generation. So that's a second issue that we have to grapple with. And this
Well, yeah, and you would hope, I would certainly from our perspective, you would hope that in countries like America and other Western countries, that the freedoms would manifest in a kind of more tolerant Islam. Now, the problem is that people like Yasir Qadhi and every other Dawa apologist essentially fight against that, essentially tell them you're conceding too much ground by saying that it's okay for people to leave the religion, that that you're going to be against child marriage and stuff like that. And they're trying to encourage them to still have the most regressive possible Islamic culture. And so this is why, I mean, as much as Yasir Qadhi sits there and tries to be the presentable face of academic Islam, he's not really doing anything different than Muhammad Hijab or Ali Dawa in trying to encourage the worst kind of Islam to be manifest in that culture, undoing the good work that it is to be exposed to the freedoms of, say, American society and the high levels of education that you were talking about, Stop. So this is why Yasir Qadhi, for all his kind of politeness, is still very dangerous, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, but
is a live issue.
There's one thing that I need to mention here, because if you look at freedom of religion, which is so strong in non-Islamic countries, if you are confronted with this is a total opposite of what you find in Islam, where if you leave Islam, you're supposed to get killed. And there you have the freedom of religion, which is the exact opposite. So how do you go and work through this in your mind if you are somebody who's coming to this country and being confronted with this culture? This is the problem that he's actually highlighting.
Yep.
But I don't know what he's going to say about this later.
Issue, but it is still internal. It is being created, it is happening, it is a discourse, and we are the ones in charge of it. So we have to embrace it, but with wisdom and knowledge. So that is the second set of issues we have to deal with. So the first, as we said, is the old school stuff, and that's internal. The second is new school internal. Is that clear, right? The first is old school internal. The second is new school internal, because that's what we're dealing with right now. Then we move on to the next, we're 7 issues, right? The next issues, number 3 and number 4. Number 3 and number 4 are external faith-based, not internal. Number 1 and 2 is internal. I hope you're following, guys, right? Number 1 and 2 is internal faith-based. Number 3 and 4 is external faith-based. So the third set of issues, and remember, all of these 7 issues, we're going to come back to them throughout the course of this class, inshallah ta'ala. That's the whole point of this class. The third set of issues, and each one of these issues has multiple areas underneath it, is the reality of dealing with the loss of religious identity in the modern world. And this is something we share with every other mainstream faith out there. The Catholics, the Mormons, the Protestants, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Jewish, every single religion out there, they are facing an attrition rate amongst their youth. Without exception. There's not a single exception to this rule, by the way. Every single faith community in the Western world is facing attrition. Not a single one of them has more youth embracing their faith than the elders. Every one of them is facing a crisis.
Well, again, it's good to admit, because again, half the time the Darwa guys are saying, "Oh, we converted 400,000 people this week to Islam, and half of Britain's going to be Muslim by the end of February or whatever." All this bullshit bravado. This is the reality. What Yasir Qadhi is saying, and again, he's right. It isn't just Islam; it's a lot of it's pretty much every religious tradition. And why is that?
Yeah.
I mean, he'll put it down to things like Islamophobia, and people are letting all these bad ideas get into the head. But no, it's the fact is, these supernatural claims struggle to justify themselves, and that's the ultimate truth of it, really. And the problem with Islam as well, or at least in my view, this is how I interpret it, the rigidity of Islam compared to other faiths mean that there's so little ground to say, look, if we just concede a certain amount of thing, all right, let's just accept that evolution is true, which is pretty much what most Christians have done. I mean, it's the Catholic Church's official position. You're removing one bar, which would allow people to sort of still identify as Muslims, still keep some of the other beliefs and stuff like that. And therefore, the attrition rate wouldn't be so high, but they're so fucking rigid. They won't let anything go. They've got the Quran has to be word for word, perfectly from God, with no mistakes. Because they hold on to such rigidity, it actually hurts them, in my view. You're going to create complete fundamentalists, or you're going to create basically atheists. And he pretty much acknowledges this, not my reasoning behind it, but he pretty much acknowledges that that's where most ex-Muslims go later in the video, from what I remember. So, yeah. I mean, what do you think about that, Stops?
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah.
Now, it is said, and I hope this is true, that our rate of attrition is less than other faiths. Inshallah, I hope it is true. And
yeah, I think that's wishful thinking. I really do. But we'll we've already talked about it, so we'll move on.
Anecdotally, it might be true, but we are still facing an attrition. We're still facing the loss of faith. According to one survey done by a leading institute, up to 20% of people born to Muslim families in this country did not identify as Muslim when they reached adulthood. Now, this is a survey. As you're all aware, surveys have their pros and cons and their ups and downs and whatnot, and perhaps that might be a little bit skewed or exaggerated, but it is a frightening statistic nonetheless.
Again, this is quite, it's quite significant that he admits this kind of thing. And he says like, oh, well, and he's right. I mean, it is notoriously difficult to get really firm numbers on this. And yes, it's one survey, so that's a fair point to make. But you could just as easily say that this is an undercount. He says, oh, it might be exaggerated. Well, does any other religion have this threat of taking you out if you leave the religion? No. So that means that, in my view, you'd far more likely to have left the religion, but be quiet about it. Because even if you're, okay, in America, you're unlikely to, someone's going to try and unalive you, but you're still going to face massive ostracization from your community, from your family. There's a good chance you're going to be disowned, or at least by some part of your family in the community. So there are much more severe penalties. So therefore, I would say the 20% figure, you could easily argue, is an undercount for factors like this. But
yeah, but you have poll after poll after poll. Look what happened in Germany now. They had a poll which absolutely confirmed this. Then look at what they did in Iran. They had 50,000 people that they asked.
Yeah,
and
that was a big one.
Three-quarters said, no, we do not want Islam as the basis for a country. We don't want to be the Islamic Republic of Iran. We just want to be Iran. We just want to be people. And if somebody wants to be a Muslim, well, go ahead. Feel free to be a Muslim. But don't force the others to be. And this is poll after poll after poll, which is showing the same trend.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But again, amazing that he admits that, and this isn't the first time Yasir Qadhi has admitted this. And as I say, this video is about a year old, and we will be getting kind of closer to the present time as we move through his collection, because he keeps adding to these. But he's acknowledged this on many occasions, and a lot of the other Dawa guys do admit this when they're doing their internal stuff. Like I've seen videos of even the likes of Ali Dara and stuff saying, there's a crisis and all this, and Mohammed Hijab. They just won't say it down at Speaker's Corner, but they all know that this is a reality. So it's interesting that.
Yeah, but Shahid Ali says the same thing. What was the name of the guy? I forgot his naughty, naughty, naughty. He also said this. So there's a couple of
Um,
imams, a couple of academics who are acknowledging this.
okay.
1 out of 5. And also, anecdotally, I don't think it might be too far from the truth, because we, when we're within our mosque communities, we feel validated. But when you go to the outside world, when you work in, corporate America, when you teach in academia, you actually come across a lot of cultural Muslims. You come
See, again, that's an important point. He recognizes the bubble that they've created for themselves, the echo chamber they've created when they're in the mosque, when they're in their little Dawa sessions, when they're all talking to each other and congratulating each other. He just comes out and admits, it's like, yeah, we're kind of deluding ourselves with this, because we're shutting ourselves off what's really going on in the world. So I have to give him a little bit of credit for being that honest, that he knows they're creating these Dawa echo chambers. Or when we're all in the mosque, it seems like, yeah, everyone's a faithful Muslim, but then they're going out partying, and they're just doing it for face saving or whatever, or just to keep up with the keep respectable with the family, but they don't really follow it. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, he concedes a lot of ground in this video.
across a lot more people who were born into Muslim families and really, by and large, don't identify or nominally identify as Muslim. And so that is definitely a major issue here, that we're having crises of faith. This is the third issue out of the 7. Is religion real? Does God exist? Is my faith true? Is my faith the one and true faith, right? Or is there another faith out there? Now, again, anecdotally, we as Muslims don't have a problem, by and large, of losing our faith for another faith, which is not the case in other faith traditions.
See, again, I think that's a bit of propaganda as well, right? And I will give my own country here, England and Britain generally, as an example. Now, between 2011 and 2021, the census showed that for the first time, Christianity was no longer more than 50% of the population identified with it. But like, and we sometimes get Christians will say, oh, these new atheist types, they're encouraged, they've led to the rise of Islam, blah blah, in the West. And it's like, no, almost all of them have gone into the not atheist category, but the don't identify with any particular religion. So the people who believe Christianity, like Muslims, for the most part, are not converting to other religions. And he still needs to believe in that bit of propaganda that all the tons of these Christians that leave are joining Islam. They're fucking not. Most of them are becoming some measure of, say, either atheist or agnostic or deistic or kind of non-specific in their religion.
Non-committed.
Yeah, they might, they're probably still, many of them probably still have like a vague belief in God, but they're non-denominational. That's what I was thinking, and they're not going to identify with any particular religion. So he'll still push this little bit of propaganda that, oh no, like no one's convinced to go convert to Christianity from Islam, but the other way around it will happen. It's like, no, you're kind of deluding yourself there. I mean, I will say, converts to Islam will tend to be from Christianity more than anywhere else, just because of the fact that Islam basically steals the Christian and Jewish history essentially and just repackages it. So there's a familiarity there for those who are, still need that God thing. But the idea that no Muslims ever go to any other religions. I mean, I know many examples of Muslims who have to, we know there's public ex-Muslims. I mean, like apostate prophet. I mean, he ended up becoming a Christian, and there's other examples. So it's it's a bit deluded, I think. Sorry, that was a rant. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, Stops.
And congratulations on your audience. Sharp, really sharp. I'm impressed because I forgot the name and I immediately got it 10 seconds later.
Yeah. Oh, Mufti Abu Layth. Yeah.
Right. Because I forgot the name, and 10 seconds later I already have it.
Oh, my audience, they know their shit. My audience, they are
brilliant stuff. Yeah.
They're peak.
We have a problem of simply losing faith, right? I.e., in many other faith traditions, one finds a good percentage of their youth leave the faith, and another good percentage find another faith, right? Whereas for us, apparently, statistics seem to indicate that by and large, we do not have any crises of people embracing other faiths en masse. Rather, we do have a crisis of Muslims just abandoning the faith.
Yeah, but see, is that a flex, or
No.
does it actually reflect badly on you? I mean, to me, you could interpret that as saying that Islam does such a bad job of, creating a religion in terms of this. This is what you have to believe in to believe in God. It's so bad at doing that that even when they leave, it's like we're just going to abandon religion altogether. I mean, that actually feels like, again, another weakness of Islam, if you like. Whereas at least if somebody else, okay, they might find some other tradition or whatever. It's like yours are just like straight to hard atheism. That really shows you're not doing this theism thing well, are you? I mean, I don't
But a
know.
lot do end up in Christianity. But even
Some,
I
yeah.
mean, Christianity is losing more than they are gaining from Muslims. That's for sure. But a lot of people, they like, or they enjoy having this idea of a God, and they enjoy having this kind
Hmm.
of a reward structure and life after death. So this is still something that is I don't know why, but it's still present in some minds.
No, it isn't a lot, but I think a lot of people they kind of make that balance where it's like, okay, look, I still have, these, I want to believe in God and stuff, but I don't want the rigid traditions that I was grew up with. I want something a bit more kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
conducive with modern society, and I think that's a positive development. I'm not that hardline. I don't care if people have this God belief, as long as they allow me not to have it and not impose anything. And to be honest, a lot of modern theists are like that. A lot of modern theists are far more chilled, so it's fine. It's not really an issue, but this
Yeah,
is
but you
this
see,
is the
this is the
problem though.
difference.
The Darwa guys don't want to concede even that ground. It's not enough for them to say, this pretense that it's okay to leave the religion. No, they still want to clamp down on that. Whereas, when I left my faith, it wasn't a problem. You just leave, and it's like the Catholics just like, yeah, okay, no problem. See you down the pub later. It's fine. It's not
Yeah.
an issue. But
But I see this as, if you come from Islam and you go into Christianity, if you go and you worship Jesus, you can do this at any time, in any language, in any way that you want. Or even if you don't, there is no punishment associated
mm,
with this. Whereas in Islam, it's much more strict. You have to do this and this and this in this language and do this and blah, 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 which you don't need in Christianity. This is why this is like a gradual weaning off the idea, I think, that some people will initially embrace the concept of Christianity, but then after a while they will realize that there are too many similarities with Islam, and then they will leave it altogether.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true for some people. I mean, there's a lot of variation on that, I think, in terms
It
of
is absolutely,
experience,
yeah.
but yeah, that's certainly part of it. Anyway, let's skip on because we still got a bit of this to go.
Becoming agnostic, becoming, just not believing. And so for us, it's not a question of, is my religion the right one or is another religion the right one? For us, the question, for us, meaning for us Muslims in the Western world, the question is, does God exist, meaning my God? Is religion true, meaning my religion? And that is a question that I'm sure many of you are also familiar with, people who are grappling with the same issue. So this is the third category of issues that modernization and secularization has brought to our table. The fourth is not necessarily doubting the essence of the faith, but doubting aspects of the faith, which then leads to doubting the faith itself, right? In other words, the fourth issue, and we're going to spend quite a lot of time in this one over the course of, inshallah, our classes eventually. The fourth issue is attempting to reconcile modern notions of virtue and modern notions of ethics and modern notions of morality with the notions that stem from our own faith. There seems to be irreconcilable differences between what we are taught is virtue, what we are taught is correct, what we are taught is noble, versus interpretations of our faith. And this leads to an entire spectrum of activism.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop him there. Look, I mean, it's not seems to be; it absolutely is. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a divide that you're never going to be able to sort out, because as long as you are sitting there and saying that it's okay to marry a 6-year-old and consummate that marriage at 9 years old, you are always going to be causing your own people to leave, because you insist on saying that a 7th century guy who was basically in charge of an empire by the end of his life, um, you keep saying that this is the moral purity that we need to stick by to the end of time, you're always going to have this problem. You're never going to be able to stop people leaving the religion in their droves, because when they look around the world, it's like, yeah, We've got to something better than that now. This is untenable. And unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for Muslims in general, the founder of their religion has got so many problems with his morality. Now, you can skip back 6 centuries. Jesus didn't own slaves and didn't, have a child bride and stuff like that. You can go back another several hundred years to Buddha. Buddha again was preaching non-violence. He was, kind of give away all your material wealth and kind of live a humble life and be peaceful and stuff like this. Unfortunately for Islam, they don't have. It's not even that it's based on someone who's far more warlike and has got far more moral problems, but it's your insistence that this is perfection, that this cannot be beaten in terms of human behavior. It is going to be a fucking millstone around the religion's neck forever. And I don't see how they can fix that.
From rejecting the faith to radically reinterpreting, to claiming that the truth of the faith has not yet been understood until this new idea comes, to an embrace of fundamentalism, and a whole bunch of spectrums in between. And in fact, I've spoken about this in quite a lot of detail, and I've categorized like 8 or 9 different spectrums on this issue of trying to reconcile something that is perceived to be true from a virtue standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, with the faith. How does one do so? And this is where gender issues, gender roles, sexuality, jihad, war, peace, prophetic ideals, incidents in the seerah, Quranic verses, Quranic commandments. These are all of this comes under category number 4, where there are notions in the Quran, there are verses in the Quran, there are incidents in the seerah, there are Islamic commandments, there are Islamic prescripts, there are Islamic ideals that at face value, prima facie, appear to be completely at odds with modern sensibilities, right?
Again, it's not appears, they are completely at odds against modern sensibilities. I mean, this is the point. I mean, again, if you expect everyone to just accept that women should be second-class citizens till the end of time, then you're going to lose people from the religion who don't feel that way, who go and mix with women and just feel like, yeah, this is okay. I can't see this to be justified. You're going to lose people because, again, it's this rigidity. You will not let any of this go. You insist that everything has to be exactly the same as it was in the 7th century. Of course, you're going to fucking lose people from the religion. It's just absolutely inevitable. And see, and it's funny because, serving in the chat, Dodgy's mum says, Yasir Qadhi's nailing all the challenges in this vid. I'm not hearing any solutions from him, though. Yeah, but well, I mean, I think he will try to make solutions in later videos. But to be honest, some of these challenges just don't have any solutions as far as I can see. They're stuck with them. Unless you're going to be to do something radical, like say, look, we're no longer going to place Muhammad so high on our list of, you have to be see all of his behavior as the perfect morality. Until you can let go of some of these things, the Quran is not necessarily every word of it is going to be perfection. If you can't let go of these things in the way that, say, Judaism and Christianity have ceded ground, all you're going to do is lose people.
And I'm not sure if everybody is aware of this, that you have a Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, which was not signed by the OIC countries. This is the Islamic Cooperation, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They have their own Islamic set of human rights, which are based on the Sharia. And it says everywhere, as laid out in Sharia, as laid out in Sharia. And this is the problem that a lot of people are facing if you're coming to even basic stuff like the human rights, where you have 2 different sort of categories. They don't fit into the 21st century.
Absolutely.
What does one do with this? Again, there's an entire spectrum and so many areas over here. But again, this is, I would say, the 4th area. Because again, so the 3rd is basically, is religion true? Is God existing or not? And the 4th is kind of sort of similar, but you're not beginning with the premise, is God true or not? It's like, well, if Islam is true, how could Islam teach this, right? So you could put 3 and 4 together, and that's technically okay to do, but we're going to separate them because they really are slightly different areas. So the 4th, as we said, is external faith-based ethics issue. The 3rd is external faith-based existential issue. Does God exist? Is religion true? Do we need religion? So that's the 3rd and the 4th area. Then the final 3, 5th, 6th, and 7th, are socio-political arenas of dispute. Number 5, the 5th area where Muslims in the West are grappling with, is identity, integration, and assimilation. What does it mean to be a Muslim in the modern world? To what extent does my faith, my culture, my value allow me to integrate? And what does integration imply? What does it mean? To what extent am I even allowed to assimilate? Where do I draw the line? What level of independence must I retain? So these are aspects of personal identity vis-a-vis the broader world that we live in. This is number 5. Number 6.
Well, on that issue, this is a problem. Again, this is why I think other religions don't represent such a problem for this, because Islam, in its orthodox way, is basically saying you already belong to a nation. So if you go to America, you go to Britain, that's not going to be your nation. This is some secondary characteristic that defines what passport you have. So therefore, again, it's always going to be one of these problems, and it's setting up this kind of artificial divide between people. Whereas most other religious groups are going to be, yeah, I can pretty much incorporate this into it. This is my personal thing, my faith and stuff like that, and it doesn't have to compromise my ability. Whereas I just think, and it's not to say that there aren't Muslims who are, reasonably integrated into Western countries, but again, I think it represents, because of the rigidity, because of the fact that it's like this has to be the most important thing in your life, no matter what. Again, I don't see how you're getting past these problems unless you drop this fundamentalism, unless you allow room to say we're not going to be so literal with everything, and it's
the absolutist attitude. Yeah,
it's okay to be, patriotic, or if people don't like that word, just kind of. Proud of the positives of your country or whatever. If you don't allow that some meaning, then you're always going to have this problem, and more than most other religious groups, I'd say.
One of the issues that we have to navigate in our generation is the reality of Islamophobia. And this is something that your generation in particular...
You knew we would eventually get to this, and this is, I've got a fair amount to say on this.
You have been born into. You have to realize I wasn't born into that generation at all. I didn't understand. There was no such thing, by and large, Islamophobia. I was born in the 70s, remember. Islamophobia, by and large, began post 9/11.
Yeah, I wonder why that would have happened. I wonder why people might suddenly... again, what he calls Islamophobia is maybe people looking at Islam and going, what the fuck's going on? I wonder why that would happen after thousands of civilians are killed. We don't recognize there might be a connection between those two events. Fucking hell.
Yeah, sure, there were some minor things here and there, but Islam was so exotic. Most people never heard of us. They never knew who we were. And we could act, talk, dress as exotic as we wanted. In my fundamentalist years, and I lived many fundamentalist years, which I don't regret at all. In my fundamentalist years, I would dress completely in an Islamic garb in the airport and whatnot, and not a single person even looked at me.
Yeah, well, again, that's before. You sort of almost seem surprised that when you...
he's a bit tone deaf, yeah.
When acts of terror are done and you make it for the rest of time now, all of us are going to have to go through these ridiculous security searches. And then you wonder why people might therefore have less favorable view of Islam because of it. But also, I thought it was an interesting comment he made there when he said, back in my more fundamentalist days. Is he just talking about how he dressed, or I'd be interested to know some more details about this fundamentalism? Because there's another comment I think he makes later, which maybe I'll save that point to when he makes this comment, because there's something a little bit sinister about what he's saying there. But yeah, I'll leave that for the moment. But
as a second glance, it was completely the norm, right? Immediately after 9/11, everything changed. You could do and talk and say and get away with so much more.
That was the bit I knew he said that. What do you mean you could say and get away with so much more? So therefore, okay, there may be different ways you interpret this, but to me that sounds like he's basically saying, I could be so much more radical. I could be so much more advocating for really horrible, regressive things without drawing too much attention to myself, basically because people were so ignorant of the religion that they maybe didn't believe what they were hearing. I don't know. It's hard for me to think of a way to interpret what he just said there in a non-sinister way. I don't know. Stops. Can you offer any, the way he says that?
There's two ways of looking at this. I understand what he's saying, but you could also understand this differently, because look, I remember there were songs where you openly say she was 17. You cannot say that today. So there's the whole sensitivity level has changed. So if I go back to the 80s and 90s, what I could get away with in those days was very different than today, because I cannot say these things, but this is general cultural. This is,
Okay, so you're talking about
I
the
mean,
changing sensitivities of culture. Okay,
it just changes. So
but
I
he's
can see both things there, where he can say, okay, because people didn't have this filter of Islam, so he can say, well, I'm going to go and pray, or I wish that guy would just blow up or something. If you say this, just out of I don't know, ignorance, you just say this. It's just a figure of speech.
all right. You're being far more charitable than I am. Then maybe I'm
And
sort
yeah,
of
but you
being a
can
cynical.
interpret this now with radical Islam in mind, and then it becomes something completely different. So there's different ways of looking at this.
I suppose it's just combined with him saying, in his fundamentalist years, it just sort of sent alarm bells. But maybe I'm reading a bit
Yeah,
too much
you
into that.
can of
But
course do that, and you can say, well, I was able to actually incite violence much better because people didn't take it so seriously. Of
well,
course, you
saying
could say
that,
that.
well, stops. I mean, saying that I would say that is certainly true in England, because back in the 80s, when Salman Rushdie was, getting a lot of heat for his, for the satanic verses, there were protests in the streets in Britain openly calling for him to be unalived. So in that sense, now, if you did that today, you probably, well, I would hope. I mean, we do have laws on there that would sort of get you arrested and stuff, although how
And
well they're
that's why
enforced
we have
is.
those laws today. Exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah, back in the 80s, it was kind of like, except that, and even to the point, even culturally, I remember it like, well, I mean, a bit too young to remember it kind of directly, but there's examples of like politicians at the time saying, well, I can kind of understand, because it's a very sensitive issue for Muslims, and just like, what the fuck? You're really gonna like make excuses for this? So yeah, I suppose in that sense there was more kind of getting away with it. Maybe that's what it means. Yeah, but who knows? Anyways, probably laboured this point a bit too much. So we'll move on and hear some more victim narrative about Islamophobia.
Because Islamophobia as a concept really was not, it was not something that I was ever exposed to. Of course there were minor incidents here and there, but that's just common, racism, if you like, not quite Islamophobia. But the Islamophobic industry, the rise of
Sorry,
an entire
did he seriously say this just now?
What, the
That
Islamophobic industry?
Islamophobia is worse than racism?
No, I don't think he said it was worse. He just said it was a different experience. He made whatever prejudice he
Yeah, but
experienced more
he
based on
gave
race.
it a level. He said not quite as bad as. And I thought, excuse me, Islamophobia is actually not existing, and it's wrong anyway. But if you're critical of an ideology, that is harmless compared to racism.
No,
In
I
my
totally
opinion,
agree,
anyway.
and we'll kind of get to. He just used the phrase Islamophobic industry, which I find interesting. But I'm gonna let him
Yes.
just talk a little bit longer before we kind of react to it, because I just want him to say a bit more.
complex of Islamophobia as a political tactic and tool, then the very fact that presidential candidates are both invoking our religion and mentioning Islam and Muslims, and they're bringing Muslims on stage, this is unprecedented.
I mean, that is a weird way to say it. What? So if somebody brings a Muslim on stage to talk, that's now Islamophobia? I thought that's platform. I mean, often you kind of see this. This goes back to George Bush talking about religion of peace and all this kind of thing. I think, if anything, politicians do a lot of work to try and whitewash the obvious issues that exist within Islam and from some members of the Muslim community. So him acting as if like it's Islamophobia. But to me, when he says Islamophobia industry, the main ones who have been doing that, in my view, are the Darwagandists. They are the likes of him and Ali Darwa, who will insist that any legitimate criticism of Islam is a prejudice akin to racism. So they're the
Mm.
ones who've been working this angle. I mean, like you, I don't even think the word is a legitimate word, quite frankly, because it is one that is just tinged with the obvious intention of creating a blasphemy law through the back door. So for him to sort of say the Islamophobia industry, it's like, You guys are the ones that have turned it into an industry by just accusing anybody and everybody who criticizes Islam of being a bigot. And so the irony of this is huge to me.
And it's not just in America, across the Western globe as well. And so your identities in particular, you are being shaped, whether you know it or not, by reacting to Islamophobia. And you have to be very careful that your identities transcend reactionary stereotypes. You can't afford to base your identity on a reaction to Islamophobia. It has to be more than that, right? So navigating the complex reality of Islamophobia, right? And how one does that. This is a sixth category we're going to have to discuss as well.
Yeah, well, I imagine in his case, he's going to recommend just calling everybody who ever criticizes Islam an Islamophobe. That is the tactic that's been used for a quarter of a century now. So
how can an ideology be an identity?
Yeah, well, but this is the thing. I mean, obviously it is for many Muslims. It is the most important thing about their identity, but they don't understand. But this is where a lot of the problems lie, because at the end of the day, a set of ideas have to be able to be critiqued. And you just sitting there and saying, "Oh, well, if you attack it, that means that you hate me, or you hate my skin color." No, it's nothing to do with that. It's attacking the ideas as much as you critique communism or capitalism or anarchism or conservatism or liberalism or whatever you're going to do, or any other religious tradition. If you haven't got that freedom, then yeah, it's a compromise that we're not going to make, essentially. And people like Yasir Qadhi are aggrieved by that. They think that makes them a victim. No, it puts you, again, you're looking for special rights, and because we say no, you've got to be treated the same as everyone else, you take that as a victim. Now you're being oppressed or something. Anyways, rant over. Let's play the next one.
And the seventh and final one, and remember this list is not exhaustive, the seventh and final one is the one that is the most pressing right now as we see what's happening in the world, and that is balancing our political and religious loyalties. Being a citizen of this country while being a part of the Ummah. What does it mean to be an American, born and raised here, carrying an American blue passport, paying taxes, and frankly, enjoying the freedoms of this country?
I mean, it's nice that he actually gives a bit of an acknowledgement there, because again, a lot of these Dawa guys or a lot of kind of Orthodox Muslims almost act as if it's an oppression to live in the West, whereas the reality is you have got more freedom in a lot of places to practice your religion. So yeah, I'll give him some credit for at least acknowledging that.
What does it mean to flout that passport at every foreign airport? What does it mean to puff up with pride and anger when somebody dares disrespect you in another country, say, I'm an American, and yet your country and my country is engaged in a genocide?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to use this rhetoric. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming this is a reference to selling weapons to Israel and the war in Gaza, blah blah blah. Yeah, well, I disagree with that characterization, but we'll move on.
We are doing in Gaza and across the world what we're all aware what we are doing. How does one balance those two identities? That's a very difficult and complex topic as well. And this is not the first time. We had to do this multiple times. I mean, this is reiteration, post 9/11, multiple times this has happened, right? So you guys are like the third iteration now, but this was, right after 9/11 was one of the first topics like this came. Can you serve in the military? That was the first fatwa that Qardawi and others had to answer post 9/11. Like an American serviceman asked the fiqh councils of the world, what do I do? I'm a conscripted serviceman. Am I allowed to go? Or am I allowed to do?
What do you mean you're a conscripted serviceman? After 9/11, I mean, I'm sorry, does he think that 9/11 took place during the Vietnam War? Because I think that was the last time that America had fucking conscription for the army. What the fuck's he talking about, a conscripted soldier? Oh, I mean, I don't know if that was just a slip of the tongue or whatever, but again, I'm not sure what reality he's living in.
What not? So that began back then, and we're still dealing with this reality to this day. So these are topics that, again, inshallah ta'ala, we will discuss. So, given the changes that have taken place, given these 7 areas that are directly impacting us, clearly there is a need for a place to discuss all of these ideas in light of these changes while we retain our authentic Islamic identity, and hence this class and the idea of lighthouse. Just like a lighthouse warns you of dangers and provides a safe passage, the goal here, inshallah ta'ala, is that this class will point out the dangers. Sometimes we can't necessarily save you because you're the ship, you're the one in charge. We're just pointing out, hey, careful, beware of this, right? And this is where we come to the awkward reality. And I'm telling you from now, don't think I have solved all of these problems. If that is your attitude, if that is your conception, then I will, disavow you of that from the get-go. I am in this just as much as you are. I might be a little bit older than you, okay, maybe a little bit more well-read than you, okay, but these are problems of our generation. They haven't been solved. They have not categorically been solved.
Again, that's a really interesting acknowledgement. He's ceding a lot of ground here. He knows that Islam really is in trouble because of a lot of these points, because they haven't got answers. Because when you have a Muslim that comes to you and says, look, I don't believe that it's right to marry someone that young. What are you going to say to them? It is okay. They're going to be exposed to all sorts of other ideas where they can live a freer life. And again, not saying like just some hedonistic lifestyle where there's just no limits on your behavior. No one's talking about that. But yes, where they don't have to have this rigid stranglehold and they see what possibilities are out there. What are you going to say to them? It's going to be fear tactics, isn't it? Well, that's no longer working on a lot of people, which is shown by the apostasy rates. But it'd be interesting to look at some of his other videos on this and see what solutions he does come to. I think there's like a minute left. I'm not sure. I'll play it for a little longer, Stotts, but I'm not sure there's that much left in this. So I'll play it for another 30 seconds, and if he's just waffling, then we can kind of wrap up. But yeah.
Sure, discussions have taken place. Sure, there are a number of, various views out there, but the discussions are too nascent. They're too new to have formed definitive orthodoxies. And we are battling with this as we speak. And so today's introductory talk was really meant to introduce you to the concept, the need, and the idea, and to underscore that this series, inshallah ta'ala, will be a series that focuses on modern issues for a modern audience.
Yeah, I think he's just kind of waffling in his conclusion, so I don't think there's much more to be gained from this. But yeah, I think it's interesting. He concedes a lot of ground. As I say, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to do all these live because he must have close to 20 videos in this list where he's looking at these issues in more detail. So, and there is some interesting stuff in there. But I think I don't want to be doing live streams just on Yasir Qadhi till the end of the year. So I'll maybe I'll do some of these as the most interesting ones to live stream. I'll make some other sort of pre-recorded videos about some of the other stuff. But I think we'll definitely return to this because he's kind of conceding, as I say, a lot of ground here that Islam is in a lot of trouble and that he doesn't really have the answers to a lot of it. So I think that's quite interesting, Stops. I don't know about you.
Absolutely. I'm actually flabbergasted. I'm really surprised at how much ground he's prepared to give and how much he is critical of his own ideology and how little he actually says, well, this is warranted, this is justified, this is this. No, he is really critical and he says, look, we have problems here, 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 everywhere. And by the sound of it, he doesn't have a solution. Because he quite openly says, yes, we are aware of these problems, but they have not been solved. And that for me is fascinating. That somebody who, I mean, especially from Islam, which is something that I would never expect, because as you quite rightly pointed out, normally they are very strict in saying, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong. Islam is perfect. It's just we are to blame if anything goes wrong. And now suddenly here we have this guy who says, no. There's a huge problem in Islam. And we have problems that have never been solved. So we need to concede that there is a real issue here where we don't have a solution. I'm floored here.
No, as I say, he conceded a lot of ground. So we will explore this in more detail in future videos. But this is just a little taster of the magnitude of poor Mr. Qadhi's job here. He's really got some explaining to do how he's going to keep Islam together. But we'll as I say, we'll cover that as the year progresses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
fascinating.
thank you to just to there was just one comment. Valentino's asking about sending me some clips and stuff. Look, Valentina, I'll give you my Discord link so you can kind of send me details on there. I don't normally kind of email people or exchange emails with people, but I'll make sure you and I can get in contact if you've got some stuff to send me. To everybody else, thank you so much for all your comments. Thank you to Stops for coming in here once again and enjoying the Counter Derby experience on a Sunday. He's a good bloke for giving up his time. I hope you enjoyed it all. I will see you with some pre-recorded stuff in the middle of the week, and I will certainly be back live next Sunday, usual time. Everybody have a great week. Take care.